Hey, everybody. You've heard me talk a lot of times now about dehumanization, about the idea of making somebody seem as though they are less than human. And I don't actually have to say this straight out to do it. One of the ways that I do it is by creating a repeating loop in my brain, thinking about a person or more likely a group of people over and over in terms that are dismissive or ridiculing or experiencing contempt. That's that combination of hate and disgust. And dehumanization is a real problem because when I have made someone seem as though they are less human than I am, and therefore less deserving fundamentally in some way than I am, then it is a lot easier to ignore their basic needs and even to commit violence on them. We also get into mutual extremism when we do this. If we have two or more subgroups in our country, and we have a lot more than two, but if we're looking at subgroups, and imagine two for this example, the first subgroup looks at the second and thinks to themselves, they're horrible people. And then they go around and they talk only to themselves and not to the other group. And they talk about how terrible the other group is. Over time, because they are doing nothing but talking about how terrible the other group is, the positions, the opinions, the thoughts of that group of people gets a little bit more extreme. And the same thing happens on the other side. The other side is looking at the first side, the first group of people, and thinking they're so terrible, their opinions are so harmful. And that group, because it's only talking within itself, becomes a little bit more extreme. When we refuse to engage, we start to get further and further apart from one another on that kind of scale. And then as we're getting further and further apart from one another, we become less likely to mix with the other group. And as we are less likely to mix with the other group, we move from they're terrible people to they're animals. We start to think about each other in those kinds of terms. I don't believe that most of us actually do this on purpose. I don't think that most of us are interested in violence happening to other human beings. I think that we do this because we're really furious and we're really scared and we really believe that the other group of people is doing things that don't need to be done or shouldn't be done or might even be evil. And I don't want to make an argument that that's not the case. There are people who do things that shouldn't be done. There are people who do evil. But if we are only interacting with each other in that sense, I never speak directly to you. I am only ever thinking how terrible you are, but we never engage directly in conversation, then I'm going to become more and more convinced of how horrible you are and you of me, even though we don't know that because we haven't actually had a conversation. This kind of pattern of dehumanization is one of the things that really feeds a reactive environment, an environment where one act of violence is more likely to be met with escalating ripples of violence. And that is exactly what we're trying to avoid if we're trying to prevent election violence. So I want to make a decision that I am going to recognize everybody's humanity, no matter what. And if I am recognizing everybody's humanity, no matter what, the first thing to remember is that I actually do mean everybody. Even that person, and even that person, and even that other person, all of them. They're all human. Doesn't mean I have to agree with them. It doesn't mean I have to like them. I can have extreme dislike for someone and still acknowledge that they are a human being. It does not mean that I have to believe their views are reasonable. And I can even believe that that person's views are actively harmful and that they are hurting the rest of us. And I can still acknowledge that even though they are doing damage, that person is still human. When I express extreme disagreement with someone's opinions or actions, that's not the same thing as calling that person fundamentally human, fundamentally evil, or less than human. It's just not. I can say that they're doing extraordinarily bad things. I can say that they're making choices that are hurting. I can say that I don't believe they're very intelligent. I can say all of those things without saying that person's just an animal. That person is just stupid. That person is just. Those kinds of degrading terms that make them less than human, that's where the violence gets started. So I actively humanize. I make a decision. At best, I can say something like this. I can understand that person's perspectives even when I disagree with them. That's a great thing to be able to say. We can't always say it, and I'm not asking you to say anything dishonestly. I'm not challenging your sense of integrity. I want you to be able to speak truthfully. So maybe it's the case I can understand their perspectives even when I disagree with them. Maybe there are people you know whose perspectives you cannot understand. You truly can't. Well, then, okay, don't say that. Try this instead. I think their positions are horrible. And also, I recognize that they are part of this national community. That doesn't mean I have to be happy that they're part of the national community. This does not have to be something I'm excited about, but I recognize that it's true. I think their positions are horrible, and also they are part of this national community. And then sometimes, even that is difficult. It might be true. It might be true that their positions are horrible and true that they're part of the national community. But sometimes, if the person is doing things that I am experiencing as bad enough, it's hard to say out loud, I think their positions are horrible and also they're part of the national community. Like sometimes that's a difficult thing to say. So try this. I don't feel like they always recognize my humanity, but I recognize theirs. That's a hard thing to say. That can be a really hard thing to say. And yet, if you have the strength to say that, you are heading off violence. I want to enforce one more time again that when we recognize someone else's humanity, that does not mean we are prepared to compromise with them. It does not mean that we have to like them. It does not mean we have to agree with them. It does not mean that we won't get up in the morning and use all of our nonviolent strategies to defeat the position of the person that we believe is doing just absolute wrong. Humanizing somebody is none of those things. It is saying, I recognize their humanity. I don't understand them. I don't like them. I don't agree with them. I'm going to try really hard to defeat them. But I also know that this person is a human being. And the value of saying that out loud over and over, I recognize that this person is a human being, is that it prevents me from ever getting to a place where I'm contributing to an environment of violence. I cannot control you. I can control me. So if I want the environment to be less violent, I have to be the person who makes it less violent. Tomorrow, we'll talk again about another action step.